So for today's class, we'll be going through a practical demo on JavaScript, objects, and arrays. Hopefully, this would be the last class on this, but then we might also touch looping in arrays and objects. That's when we get to the looping aspects in future classes. So by that I mean after we treat looping, we'll look into the loops related to objects and also loops related to arrays. So for today's class, it's divided into two sections. First, we have the object section, and the next section we have the array section. So for this object section, we are going to have practical demos on object and string concatenation, which we are already familiar with, but then for the sake of those that might not still, grasp the whole thing, we'll still go through that again. Next, we'd look at nested objects. Now, this nested objects actually represents objects within objects. So we'd also see how that plays out on VS Code. And after this, we'd also look at nested objects and arrays. So this actually means that it is possible for you to have an object and an array within an object. It is also possible for you to have an array within an object within an array within an object. Sorry, I hope it's not confusing, but I would show you a demo of how the whole thing works. Also, we'll look into other object displays. As we all know, the most popular ways of displaying objects is by using the bracket and the dot notation. And both of these methods actually make use of the object name and also the property name. That's the key within the object. But then we'll also see some other ways you can display values under object. And after I show you guys a sneak peek of an example in each of these sections, we'll then begin the practical demo straight away. So for the next section, we have arrays, and we'll also go through array and string concatenations. Also, we'd look into nested array, which is arrays within an array. And we'd also see nested arrays and objects. So it's also similar to the fact that you can have an object within an array, or you can have an array within an object within an array within an array. no, no need to get confused. I would explain all of that when we get to the VS Code. Also, I believe by now we are already familiar, with some methods under arrays. In the last class, we saw the push method, the pop method, the shift, the unshift, and some other methods. So for this class, we'll just go through some few other methods we can use, especially when it comes to searching for array items or indexes. We'll see the methods that enable that to happen. And after this, we'll then go into a quick demo on arrays for today's class. So without wasting time, our first section is the objects. So for the first part of this section, we have object and string concatenation. And now, like I said before, we are not going to go through too many stories. I'll just show you a brief example and we'll get to translate all of these codes on VS Code. So for this example, we have the constant that has been defined. I mean, an object name that has been defined with the const keyword or declared. And this object name has several key value pairs. So you can see the f underscore name is giving the value of John. I think that actually represents first name for me, but due to the amount of wordings, I just had to shorten it. So for the next, we have L underscore name representing last name, but just has the name of L underscore name. We also have the age and we have the country. Now each of these keys have values, and each of these values can actually be concatenated with strings, which we can see in the syntax below it. So this syntax here begins with my name is. My name is here is a string, and you can see the addition symbol. Now, this particular symbol can actually represent different meanings depending on the context. Peradventure, you had a digit in where my name is, and you also had another digit after the addition symbol. In that context, it would actually mean addition. But in this context, it actually means concatenation. So we'll also be, going through the operators. When we get there, we'll be seeing operators in JavaScript, and you would see that the add symbol can actually add digits together, and it can also concatenate strings together. So the person dot f underscore name here actually represents the value of John, and the person dot l underscore name represents the value of Doe. Next, it is also concatenated with I and I am, with the person dot age concatenated with years old from, and then person dot country. So this concatenation would actually give you a full sentence, which would output my name is John Doe and I am 44 years old. So we'd also be seeing this example on VS Code and some other types of examples. Next, we have the nested object. So like I said before, it's possible for you to have an object within an object. So this object name here is country, which has been declared with the const keyword. Now this country is actually an object, but within this object we have another object inside. Now if you notice very well, you have the c underscore name, which is a key to have the value of Nigeria. You also have the flag to have the value of green and white, which is a string. Now you have the state here. Now this state here is a key, but the value it is assigned with is an object itself. So you can actually say that the object here represents the value, or some could say the value here is an object. Either ways, it's okay. So this particular object here is actually a value for this key, which is state. And to reference the values within this object that is within the outermost object, you would need to increase the sequence in terms of the referencing. And you can see that to be done here below. So it begins with country dot state. Now we all know that the brackets and the dot notation is what we use in terms of referencing values within an object. So the countries dot state, if it were to be just these two, it would actually give you this entire object as the value. And as we all know already, you cannot print the entire object on the screen. So what you would only see would just be the object, itself. That's the object name appearing on the screen. But to actually reference the value of, let's say, Ikeja here, you would need to increase the sequence. So this would then become state dot Lagos. Now you would remember that this Lagos here is a key, and to reference the value name, we would need the key. So this would be country dot state dot Lagos. So we'll see how this actually works on VS Code. Now our next example, like I said before, is nested objects and arrays. And for this, you can have an object within an object and an array within an object. So for this example, we have an object. That's the outermost object, which starts here. Now within this object, we also have another object. So this example is quite similar to the other one. The only difference here is that this particular object here has an array inside the object. Now you can see that this state here has the value of an object which begins with Lagos and ends here. Now within this Lagos key value pair, the value for Lagos itself is not an ordinary value, but it's a list of two items, which is Lagos mainland and Lagos island. So what this means is that you can actually reference an array within an object. Depending on how you choose to arrange them, they can actually be embedded within each other. Although the only issue here is the fact that to reference the array, you must use array referencing methods and not the object referencing method. So this is one thing we need to be careful about when we are trying to reference an array within an object within an array, or depending on how we choose to arrange that. So here I'm actually making reference to Lagos Island. And for me to do that, you would begin with the object name, which is country. Next, you would reference it by the key that has the value of the object, which is state. Now, the next referencing would be by the key value pair, since it's an object, and that's Lagos. But if you notice very well, this Lagos is now referenced with array, um, you know, methods, array referencing methods. That's this bracket notation here of one, and that's because the value for this key here is an array. And so to reference an array, we use the index that JavaScript has. And as we all know, indexing for JavaScript begins at 0. So this means that the Lagos mainland here has the index of 0, and the Lagos island here has the index of 1. And so this would output the value Lagos island. So no need to worry about it, no need to be confused. I would start the entire process afresh on VS Code. So next we have other object displays. Now in JavaScript, the most popular way to display an object is by the object and the key or property name. So we already know this to be the dot notation or the bracket notation. And we can see an example of the dot notation, which is object name dot key, or the bracket notation, which is object underscore name, then with a bracket and the key name within that bracket. Now, some other ways of displaying objects are also displayed on the screen, and you can see the first one to be object dot values. So this object dot values is a method that can be used to display an object. But then this particular method actually converts the object into another data type for it to be displayed on the screen. And for the next method, we have the Json.stringify. So what this particular one does is that it converts the object into a string, but it displays the string in JSON format. So we'll also see how all this, actually work on, VS Code. So for the object.values, this particular method converts the object into an array and displays the entire values of the array. So this particular one would convert the object from an object data type to an array, and then it would display the entire values within that array, since it's not an object anymore. Okay, so here's a quick example of an object, and you can see that this example here is the very first object example we've had in today's class. And below it we have this particular syntax here, which is object dot values with the object name of person. So what this does is that it's going to convert this person to an array, and then each of these values would be printed out completely. So you are going to have John Doe 44 and America on the screen. So that's how the object of values does it. Next, we have the Json.stringify. Now, this Json.stringify is actually a function, and this function converts the object into a string. Now, after this conversion, it's going to display the entire string in JSON format. So what this means is that the key value pairs within the object becomes a string automatically. So we already know that initially you can have your values to be a string or number or whatever you want. But here, every key would be a string, and if the value was a string before, it's going to remain the same way. So this means that for your digits, you wouldn't have them converted to string, but any other thing that was a string before would remain a string, and also all the keys within the object will become strings. So this particular function would actually display the entire string. So you are going to have your key and your values displayed on the screen, everything completely. And this is also a brief example of an object again, but for the sake of how long the output would be, it's the reason why we don't have the entire thing on the screen. But then just know that when you make use of this function with an object name, you're going to have the entire object being displayed as a string, including the keys and the values. You can see here we already have f underscore name. Now it's a string since it's in double quotes, and it still holds the string of John. And these dots here actually mean that it continues all the way, as we all know. So without wasting time, let's quickly try out all these things we've seen this morning. Just testing. Next, we have our JavaScript. Now we have our HTML and our JS file. So we begin with object and string concatenation. So we begin by declaring our object const of this info. Okay. This would hold the value of John. Next we have the age, and this would hold an integer value. We also have country. So now we have our array. Next thing we do to make use of the document dot inner dot get element by id. So for this, we'd create an HTML element for the outputting. P1 inner HTML. I can give this info of first name. So I'm trying to, test this out to see if it works. Okay, so John is displayed here. So that means it actually works. So the next we'll do here is to add some strings into this. So we can actually begin with my name is. It's always good you create spaces at the beginning and ending of a string. So we add the plus symbol. Now, like I said, this symbol is here for concatenation. That's in this context. So we'll have the first name.
Someone's mic is on, please. Let the person continue.
Okay. Um, please, if you know your mic is on, please turn it off. Oh, this is meant to be info dot first name. Dot first name. So now we already have my name is John. I would add the do, which is info dot last name. We would also attach this with another string. So I think we're actually leaving the entire space here. So because of this, I'll take this to a new line. Yeah. My name is John Doe and I am, this is age. This will be concatenated with his age, 44, another string years old. From, I think lastly would have his country. Yeah, so this should actually output my name is John Doe and I am 44 years old from America. Okay, so we have this on the screen. My name is John Doe and I am 44 years from America. So this particular concatenation actually works with objects and you can actually concatenate anyhow you want it. So depending on where you would put the object name and keys or your strings, you can actually arrange it anyhow or any order you want. But you should always make sure that the plus sign is always in between every part of this syntax. You can see we have the plus sign everywhere at the end and at the beginning, except for here, we don't have it at the end. And we also don't have it beginning the statement. But any other place in between, you have the plus sign there. So that's how you actually concatenate objects with strings. For the next thing, we'll actually be treating nested objects, which is objects within an object. So we're going to have const say info 2. So for this, we'll have we have? Let's just still have first name again. Have player. Do we call this favorite? Remember, this is just for practicing. I don't want any arguments with whether you like him or not, please. Age 37. Don't know, can't remember. Anyway, it's just fictional. Also have clubs played for. So for this, we are going to have an object within this object. So this would actually have different years. This you have Spain, and Spain played for Real Madrid. Okay, so I'm going to take this to a new line so I can see everything at once. So you can see that for the object within the object, it actually highlights the curly braces in a light purple color. So this actually shows that this is within something. And Manchester United also went to Italy. Juventus. So now we have an object within an object. So the next thing we'll be doing is referencing the countries, and we should expect to get the clubs. Okay, so for this we'd have another p tag. Give this an ID of key2. Inner HTML. Now let's see if this works. How does player? This should give us the name of this player. Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, for us to reference the clubs which he played for, we would have to increase the sequence of this. So we'll begin with referencing this by the info dot clubs played. So printing this out on the screen, you wouldn't have any results, and that's because the value of this particular key is an object itself. So if I should go back to the browser, you can see we have object. So like I said before, you can't print an object on the screen. You can't print the entire object directly. We already know that if I should remove this and print info2, it would show us the same thing, since info2 itself is also an object. We have object. So the next thing I'll be doing now is referencing the clubs played for. And these are actually some realistic ways data are being structured. Although you might not be making use of this, but this is some basic way you can structure data. So the clubs played for dot Spain. This should give us club he played for in Spain, which is Real Madrid, and we have Real Madrid. This would also work for other keys. Yeah. And also the sequence would also increase as you keep adding objects even within the object within the object. So let's still add an object to this. So here in Spain, Spain is going to have a value of an object. For this, we would have numbers. This will hold. This will actually hold a value, and this value is going to be an array of 7 and 9. Can add another key to this object. This will be teammate. Teammate here will be an array. Okay, so for those who don't know much about sports, don't worry, but just understand that this is a string and this is an integer, and they are both within arrays that are within an object, within an object, within an object. So we are going to make reference to the shared numbers and also his teammate, and this would actually begin with the object name as usual. Okay, so for this we don't have everything on one line, so I'll bring this here. Okay, so now we can see everything. Although I wish there was a way we could see it on a straight line, but no problem with that. Or probably I'll change how I structured
If
it.
I can use format by PTR,
Yeah.
maybe that can also work too to make it happen to appear in the way we can see.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is,
Just like
yeah, so I'm going to structure it this way. Yeah, I think this is much better. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes. So I think this structure is okay. So now we have the info too, which is an object, and each of these is actually key value pairs within the object. That's this here, this one, this entire thing here is a key value pair within the outermost object. Now this here is also a key value pair, and this, oh sorry, I actually meant this from here downwards. Yeah, that's from here to here is a key value pair. So the key here is clubs played, and the value is everything from here to here. Now within this value, we also have another key value pair, which is this key here, Spain, and this value here. Now within this key value pair, we also have another key again, which is shared number, and it has the value of an array, which is 7 comma 9, also with this key and this value. So that's how you can, manipulate the objects and the arrays and embed them within each other. So we are going to make reference to the shared numbers. So from the info to the next thing we would have is the clubs played. From the clubs played would have Of course, the country he played for. That's the country where he played, Spain. And for the country we want to reference his shirt number. Now we have this to be info to dot club underscore play dot Spain dot shirt number. And now the shirt numbers. Now because this is an array, we are not going to use the dot notation. We're going to make use of the bracket notation. And we already know that indexing in an array begins with 0. So for the number 7, it has an index of 0. So for this, we'll have 0 here, and this should give us 7 on the screen. We have 7. So for those who might still be confused, let me go over this slowly and gradually. So first we'll have info.clubs played. This would give us object, and that's because the entire value is an object itself. So if we are to increase the sequence by referencing it with the country, it would also return an object because Spain has the value of an object. Next, within the object, we have the shirt number. Now, this shirt number is actually an object, but because the value is an array, and as we all know, an array can be displayed on the screen completely. That's the entire values within the array. This should actually give us the number 7 and 9 on the screen. And you can see we have that to be 7 comma 9. So if I should change this from Spain to teammate, this should give us the names of two of the teammates he played alongside. Yeah, so we have this on the screen too. So that's actually how you can make use of arrays within objects, within arrays within object, depending on how you choose to structure it. So one final example, we'll be working with some employee data, although it's fictional, so it isn't something original. So the employee here would be an object. The key value pairs would have employee on. This employee would have an object again. Each of these objects would have a first name and last name. We've used John Doe a lot. Samuel. Going to have an age. I use, let's just say sex instead. Male. Position. Network. Technician. Next, we'd have another employee. So we'll copy this so we don't waste too much time. We'd have like 6 of them. Okay. So now we have this. So all we need to do is to change the name. Williams, also be female. What position? We have a male too. Again, previous head of software. Okay, female. What position should we give? Hmm. So this is actually one of the ways you can make use of the object, and the object is mostly used for structuring data. Okay, one last name. Yeah, so we have an object of 6 random forged employee details. Key tag is an ID of 3, K3. Remember, we can do this with other text HTML tags. So now if I should print employee dot, okay, everything here is employer one, so change this to 2, 3, 5, and 6. Employee dot employee 4, the first name should give us the first name of whoever is the fourth employee, and that is Charles. So to have the first and the last name, we could just do this basic concatenation. So we have his full name, Charles Undu. Weird. Okay, so that's that with being able to reference objects within objects. And like I said before, the object here is a like a data structure which can be used to structure real life data. So for the next thing, we would also be going through other object displays. And for this, we have the first one, which is object dot values. So for this one, we'll be making use of, let's make use of the employee. Okay, this one's a lot. So we make use of the info above. So we'll assign this to a variable x. This will be object dot values. Now within this bracket, you would have the name of the object itself, and this would be info. The next thing we'll do is to print out the info. Get elements by ID. Create another one again. Probably would have this to be a heading tag, heading 4. We could even have an entire, what's it called, entire HTML elements. In between would have the span tag, ID of key 4. So would say values for these objects are. So right now we have this on the screen, the value for this object are, but the moment we connect this with the span elements, we should have the list of values right here on the other, on this part of the screen. This will be p4 dot inner html, the value of x. So you can see we have the values here: John Doe 44 and America. So this particular method actually converted the entire object into an array, and it then prints out the values of that array, which is displayed here. So this is for the object dot values method. So for the next one, we would have the object, the Json stringify function. And this is also easy. So I would create another variable y, and this would have the Json stringify, the object name of info. We also have another HTML element. So in this example, you can actually mix the HTML element where the JavaScript text would be rendered with other HTML elements. So here would say the JSON representation of this object, not the object tag, just object, is, and add our span tag. Remember, the span tag is actually inline, which is why you have it on the same line there. For adventure, we had it to be the p tag. You have them appear below this. I'm guessing so, but I expect that that would happen. This span tag would have an ID of key 5. 5 dot inner HTML to be equals to y. Now we should have the JSON format of the entire object. Okay, so for this we have the JSON representation of this object is, you can see it stops exactly here, and that's because the entire line of code couldn't fit into this place. So we have them on a single line. And this is exactly how JSON actually represents its own data. So you can see that it still maintains the key value pairs, which is first underscore name with the value of John, last underscore name with the value of Doe, and age with the value of 44. Likewise, country with America. But each of these keys now, they are all strings, which is why you have this first name within double quotes as also the value. And you also have last name within double quotes. Likewise with the Doe, the age is now in double quotes, but the 44 here still maintains its data type as a number data type. So it doesn't convert this into a string. It would only convert the keys to strings and leave the ones that were string before still in string format. So this is actually the two ways you can display an object if you don't want to use the dot notation or the bracket notation. But always remember this: for the object of values, it would convert the object into an array, which is this we have here. And then for the JSON.stringify, it converted the entire object into a string, but it would represent them in the JSON format, which is what we have here below. So that's that for objects. Next, we move on to arrays. Yeah, so this is the final and the last section of today's practical class. And without wasting time, let's quickly see what we have. So here we have arrays and string concatenation, which is quite similar to the object and string concatenation. So you can see that the arrays here, they have items which do not have keys, but they can be referenced with the indexes. So the item or the element in this array, which is John here, the first element, it has the index of 0, and the Doe here has the index of 1, and 44 the index of 2, and America the index of 3. So now this particular syntax here is quite equivalent to the syntax we had before when we touched object. The only difference here is that these particular elements are being referenced by their indexes. So this syntax here would give you: my name is info with the index of 0 is John, info with the index of 1 is Doe, my name is John Doe, and I am info with the index of 2, that's 44 years old from America. So you have the same output you had before. The only difference is just the change in the syntax. So next we have the nested arrays. So here our outermost structure would be the array itself, and we are going to have an array within an array. I would also have an object, within the array too. So here we try to reference the element here, which is month, which is already within an array within the array. And for this first value of full name, it has the index of 0, age here has the index of 1. This entire array, that's from here to here, has the index of 2. So this means that the moment you reference this by the index of 2, you will have all the values within this particular array displayed on the screen. Hobbies with the index of 3, other infos with the index of 4. Now to get the particular values within this array that is within the outermost array, the sequence of referencing also increases. And you can see here we have this to be info referenced with the value of 2, which references this entire array from here to here. Now within that array, we referenced it with the index of 1. So now we already know that this day here has an index of 0 within this array that holds it. That's the inner array, and the month here has the value of 1. So this particular syntax will actually output the value of month on the screen. Next, we have nested arrays and objects. So like we saw before, the array within the object, within the object, within the object, it's actually possible with arrays also. So you can have an array within an object within an array. So and this can actually work on VS Code. But depending on the structure, the referencing method would also change. Now for this example, we have an array which begins with full name as the first item or element. The second item is age, which you can see it holds the index of 1. Now the third item is an object which begins right here and ends here. Now this entire object holds the value of 2. So this actually means that if you should reference this by using just info square bracket 2, this would not be displayed because it's an object, and we already know that objects cannot be displayed on the screen. But then within this object we have key value pairs. So we have the d underscore o underscore b, and that's the value of an array within the object. So to reference this particular array, we already know that referencing objects would require the dot notation or the bracket notation. But to reference this entire value, you would use the array method, which is the index referencing. So for this syntax we have here, info with square brackets 2, it will actually reference the entire object. But then we have dot d underscore 0 underscore b. So this is the object referencing method here, one of them, and this would actually reference the entire array we have within this method, which is day, month, and year. So it would print out the value within the entire array. Now peradventure we needed just one value within this array that is inside this object. All we need to do is to add another square bracket and then with the index value. So we also have some other inbuilt methods in connected with arrays, and we saw some of them in the last class: the pop, the push, the shift, the unshift, and some other methods there that you can actually use within an array. Now under this we have searching for an item or the index for an item. So this particular method here would actually allow you to search for an item or to know the index of an item. And for the very first method, we have the index of method. Now this method, when applied on an array item or element, it would actually return the index of the first occurrence of that item. Now what this means is that if the item seems to appear multiple times within that array, it would only return the index of the first occurrence. So that's basically like the very first time the item ever appeared within the array, leaving the other occurrences useless. Also, we have the next method, which is the last index of method. Now, this method would actually search for the index of an item and it would return the last occurrence. So this means it is going to return the last time the element appeared within the array. So both this particular method actually works when you have multiple elements occurring within an array and you want to know the last time that particular element happened to be there, because an array can have multiple elements. Now we have the last method, which is the includes method. Now this method is used to actually know if an element is within an array. Probably you have an array of a lot of items you don't know about, and you really want to know if there's a particular item within this array, though it's not something you already know since the array is a lot, but you just want to know if it's there. Now this particular method would return the boolean value, which is either true or false, depending on if the item exists in the array or not. Now, by making use of the includes method, if the item you are looking for exists in the array, it would return the value of true. But if it doesn't exist, it will return the value of false. So now we'll have a quick demo on arrays so far, and let's go back to our VS Code. So we are here now to create a section for arrays. So next would declare array for this animals. I have an array of different animals here. Okay, I'm going to add this again. Values animals array, or have a span tag. Give this an ID of key 6. Now we should have a list of all the animals we have here. Yeah, animals of this area: jaguar, dog, lion, zebra, and cat. So next we can concatenate, all of this. For this, I would say I'll actually begin with man's best friend. We already know that is a so the dog has the index of 1. Man's best friend is a dog. I think I'll take this on another line, and I'll also close this too. Yeah, now we have a lot of space. Yeah, mouse dot, not dot. Lion has the one of 2. The lion easy again. Yeah, he is king of the jungle. Yeah, and he loves eating. Of course, the guy likes eating zebras. So I'll change this to zebras. Okay, so to actually ident this zebras. What do I do with the cat now? Jaguar and the cat. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. They are in the same family. Yeah. So for this, we should have man's best friend is a dog. The lion is the king of the jungle and he loves eating zebras. And the cat, the jaguar and the cat are in the same family. So hopefully, I expect that there is no mistake. Let's see. Okay, so we have it. The values of the arrays are. I'll probably make this a heading. Oh, this would also affect them. Okay, no problem. Leave it that way. But our normal HTML text ends somewhere here. Yeah, somewhere here. So we have this to be man's best friend is a dog, the lion is the king of the jungle, and he loves eating zebras. The jaguar and the cat are in the same family. Okay, so I didn't add a lot of space into this. So hopefully now we should have enough space. Yeah, we do. So that's how we can actually concatenate with arrays. So the next thing we'll be seeing is nested arrays.
Hello, please, sir. Hello, sir.
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will not be able to answer. I will not know how to ask this question at the moment. This
Okay.
one you just did, can you break it into lines like we want the mama's best friend is this and this, and the other one is second line. Can you break it? Do you get like I said you are writing a composition?
Okay, on the same line.
Everything just yeah, instead of being on the same line, can you break it into
Yeah, I think the idea is to concatenate. So it's supposed to be like this. That's the way we can understand it better. Me, I'm
Yeah,
just saying. Because if you get it so like, people will only get the picture clear like this concatenation. You understand? So
exactly.
looking like this would be like this thing is combined. It's not individual.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
okay,
So
I'm even talking about the output, too, as in, the output. I'm talking about the output, not even here in
okay,
the
the
text.
output on this
What
screen.
we want it to show. Yes, as in, when we output this, we want it to come. Man's best friend is a dog, and then the lion is the king of the jungle.
On
How
separate
do I
lines.
output it that way? Yes, on a separate line. That's what I'm trying to ask.
Okay. So to do that, I'll actually add the new line. Normally, if I should increase the, okay, if I reduce this, it appears to be like this on one line, but then, okay, no problem. I'll do that just after, but then let me just continue with this part. Hope you're okay with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for the next part is actually having an array within an array. Was two. So for this, we have an array of land animals. So we have our first array within the array. Second array would be an array of birds. Hmm, what am I thinking of? I would have another array of sea animals. This is actually a lot on a line. So for this, I would use this method of structure. Okay, so after this, we can have some normal, other things here. Okay, so we have an array within an array. So referencing any of these items is actually very, very easy. And so our document or get element by ID. Actually comment this out. So we'll make use of the P6. Now let's see what happens if we should try to print out the entire array. Okay, so we have the entire array on the screen from here to here, irrespective of the fact that somewhere within arrays within the general array. So if I begin by only referencing this by the first value, which we already know that the first value is this entire array here. That's they all have the index of 0. This here has the index of 1. This has the index of 2. Now this lizard here individually has the index of 3, croc with 4, snake with 5. So this should just print on the screen jaguar, lion, cow, and goat. Yeah, we have them, the exact thing we wanted. And now if I wanted to still print just one of them within this entire array, I would increase the sequence, and I want the lion on the screen. So the lion here has the index of 1. So this will actually just give us lion. And this doesn't just apply to basic stuff like this we're applying on, but even to the extent of trying to get real structure real life, you know, data within an array. So this is how you can actually structure an array within an array. So let's have an object within the array itself. This object will have value called as the dog family. And the value for this object key here would be an array again. So now we are going to have an array within an object within an array within an array. So the dog family has
Sorry,
um
sir. Sorry, sir, to interrupt you, sir. I've
okay,
actually been trying to get more differences between the arrays and the object, but from what I'm looking at now, because it just occurred to me now that object uses curly braces, while array use square braces.
yeah, true. And also their indexes,
The differences.
are different. Yes,
Yeah.
Rottweiler. Not sure I know how to spell this. What dog do we have? Ooh. Okay, so we have an array value which has this set of elements. Now they are assigned into to the key name of dog family, which is an object. So this entire statement from here to here is just a singular key value pair. So we are going to add another key value pair again. This could be something else. Just call this others. Okay, so I think for this I would have this here. So it's actually good that you structure your code, this way, so you wouldn't get confused and you would know which is inside which. Others here would have other families. We have cat family. I think I'll just stop in the next one. Okay, so we have an object of an array of animals too, with items, which is an array here. Now this array item has an object inside. The object has key value pairs which holds an array. So now we are going to reference the name of these dogs and the other families under this section. And so we begin with the array name, which is animals 2. Next we have the item we want to reference. I want to reference this with the first item here, which is everything here. So that has an index of 0. Now within this item, we have a singular item. Oh, sorry, not a singular item. We have up to 5 items within this entire array here. With the first item being jaguar, the second being lion, third is cow, fourth is goat, and the fifth is an object. So now we need to reference this object within this array. And so this would actually be with the array index of 4. because this has an index of 0, 1, 2, 3, and this entire value here has an index of 4. But remember, it's an object. So when you're trying to reference it from the outside, it would actually take the referencing of the one covering it. But the moment you want to reference inside, you would have to use a particular way of referencing the data type itself. So within this object, we have two key value pairs, the dog family with its own value and also the others. So to reference the dog family, to be dot dog family. And now if we should save this, we should have the entire dog family. Yeah, we have them: Rottweiler, Bulldog, Husky, and Pitbull. Now to get the particular breed of dog we want, all we need to do is to reference this using the array method of referencing, since it's an array itself. So for the Bulldog, this has an index of 1, and this should give us that breed, the Bulldog. So these are just some of the basic ways you can play with arrays and objects being nested in each other. But trust me, there are some, there are even some very, very complex, nesting between the two. This is just a basic overview of how, nesting looks like when it comes to arrays and objects. So the next thing we'll be seeing are the inbuilt methods in arrays. So like I said before, we have the index of, and so for this we'll be making use of, okay, we'll make use of the animals array here. That's this one. So I think we can comment all of this now. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, make use of this. We'll assign this to a value, variable name xy. I would have index of, okay, that's meant to begin with the array name. And within this, we are going to look for the first occurrence of any item. So this will be, we have lion there. I think we do. Okay, yes, we do. So I'm going to have multiple lions within this. Have some other lions too. So now we have the lion string appearing 3 times on within the array. But then we want to only print out the first occurrence of this string. So to do that, we'll make use of the index of method. And when we assign this the value of xy, the very first occurrence of this lion here has the index value of 2. That's 0, 1, 2. So we should have the value of 2 on the screen. Yes, so here we have the value of 2. Now to get the very last occurrence of this particular string, let's still add some of them. This would actually be last index of. this should give us the very last time the lion string occurred within this array, and that's here. So this begins with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. So we should have 7 now instead of 2. We have 7. And for the final method, which is the includes method, which would actually tell us if particular element exists within the array. Does it include a lion? Of course it does. So this should give us true. Yeah, we have this to be true. And if we have any other thing that doesn't exist there, this should give us false. Yeah, false. Since we don't have the shark there. So I guess that's that for today's practical demo. It was a very easy one anyway. And some of these things we saw today can actually be practiced on a very, very high level when it comes to structuring data, especially with arrays and objects. And as we saw in today's class, you can actually have each of these you know structures embedded within each other. You know, some other complex data structures make use of this particular data types in terms of structuring probably a very, very critical and huge amount of data. But trust me, once you're able to learn the array and the objects properly and you know how to nest them within each other and structure and reference them, then structuring data becomes easy for you. That's with respect to objects and arrays. So thank you all for today's class. So I guess the only thing left for this class is looping in objects and arrays. Now with loops, you can determine the number of times an item occurs within an array or an object. You can also, print out the items within an array individually. You can also perform some kind of, you know, specific, what's it called? Operations within these items or objects within this array. It just gives you the power to do anything you want within the items of that array. But hopefully we were not able to see that today. But when we touch looping in JavaScript, we'll definitely go back to array and objects and we'll see how that works there so far. Thank you.